Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, MS, these are all serious or fatal neurodegenerative diseases that lack effective treatments. I'm joined today by two executives who are developing promising, novel therapies in the field. Maria Macchiachini is founder and CEO of Annovis Bio, which is focused on improving axonal transport, while Robert Glantzman is Chief Medical Officer of Clene, whose approach relies on nanotherapeutics. In this roundtable session, we discuss the particular challenges in developing CNS drugs, how Maria and Robert have steered their companies throughout the last 2 challenging years, and what they're hoping to achieve during the upcoming JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, virtual though it may be. The company's approaches, one drug increases energy and the other speed, could be synergistic. If that ends up being the case, remember, it all started here on the HealthBiz podcast. I'm your host, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. If your life sciences or healthcare company needs strategy consulting, you can reach me, dwilliams@healthbusinessgroup.com. And remember, please subscribe to the podcast wherever podcasts are found. I'm David Williams from HealthBiz Podcast, and I am joined today by two executives, and we're going to be talking about drug development in CNS. First of all, I want to say hello to Maria Macchiachini. She is CEO of Annovis, and also Bob Glantzman, Chief Medical Officer at Clene. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So we thought this would be kind of novel. We do a virtual roundtable discussion in advance of an in-person JP Morgan conference. Now it looks like this is going to be as real as it gets. Maybe we should have done an in-person roundtable and then we could do a virtual JP Morgan. But this is where we are. But today we're going to talk about advances in central nervous system research. Maria, why don't I start off with you? Tell me a little bit about Annovis, which you founded and run. What's the background of the company and where do things stand now?
Okay, so Annovis really was founded to treat Alzheimer's disease with a drug that did inhibit A beta. If you think back 10, 11, 12 years, amyloid was the way to inhibit Alzheimer's disease. Now, in the meantime, I think that is probably a restricted way, and for some interesting reason, our drug changed with the times. As the Times said that Alzheimer's was not just amyloid, our drug said, yes, I do inhibit other things. So it turns out that what we actually do, we do improve axonal transport, which is the information highway of the nerve cell. So if a nerve cell fires faster, if a nerve cell perceives faster, and if a nerve cell sends signals faster, your brain will work faster, your limbs will work faster, everything will work faster. But what is interesting about making a nerve cell work healthier is that then, because it's healthier, it doesn't die as fast, because basically that's what neurodegeneration is. The nerve cells eventually die and the function is lost. So I'm happy to say that our drug works in most neurodegenerative disease animal models we tried, and in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in humans.
Well, that sounds good. I know it takes a long time to get there. What's happened a little bit? You mentioned with Alzheimer's and the sort of the amyloid approach, which is now a bit out of fashion. How did it become so central and hang on for so long?
Well, in 1906, there was this German doctor that had a 52-year-old patient who was demented. She was severely demented. And when he opened her brain, he saw plaque. So ever since, Alzheimer's means plaque. Now, a little later, they found tangles. And in the last few years, it was found that Alzheimer's really is a lot more than plaques and tangles. It's also alpha-synuclein, it's TDP-43, it's vascular diseases, and then it could be anything else. And I think that maybe Bob is going to talk about energy, which is 100% correct. If you don't have good energy, your cells get sick. So the fact, that's not that amyloid isn't toxic, amyloid is toxic, but it is not the only thing in the brain that is toxic, and therefore amyloid is a limited approach.
So, Bob, I see most pharma and biotech companies that I see, especially, are like Annovis in that they usually start with an A, and you can sort of see some connection there. What is Clene, and why that spelling, and what's the background of the company?
So Clene is a very different company. The CLENE is actually the Anglo-Saxon spelling before the French invaded the UK. So it's actually the old spelling of clean, of the word clean.
Got it.
And clean, and it has a lot of meanings for this company because what we manufacture, which is really a breakthrough, are clean surfaced nanocrystals of transition metals. And when we say clean surface, we mean that there's nothing, they self-organize in highly pure water, what we call pharmaceutical grade water, which is just water, nothing else. And they self-organize atom by atom and remain stable in suspension in water for years. So that's the breakthrough of clean. Now you say, well, okay, that's nice, but what does that do? So it turns out that if you actually make nanocrystals like this, they become catalytically active. And when we talk about catalysis, we're talking about the donation and reception of electrons. So they become a little electron banks, essentially, especially gold, which is a very interesting atom in and of itself. Our lead asset is CNMAU8. As you can imagine, CNM, Clene, Nanomedicine. AU is the symbol for gold, and 8 is the 8th iteration of these nanocrystals. So that is our lead asset, and we're testing it in multiple models of neurodegeneration. And I actually took a little review of Maria's website. I think what they're doing is really interesting. I think we agree with her totally that axonal transport is critical to the health of neurons. And we also agree with her that energy production is critical. So the breakthrough of Clene is that what we've been able to show in multiple preclinical models, in fact, every single preclinical model, including amyloid beta toxicity, is that we allow neurons and glial cells, especially oligodendrocytes, to manufacture energy. When we say energy, we mean ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is essentially the monetary exchange of energy within cells. We allow cells to make energy in the setting of stress. That is the breakthrough of Clene, and that really drives almost all the beneficial effects that we see.
So I think, it's very exciting and interesting to hear what you're describing. And I would say that pretty much anybody listening in, whether or not they're in the field or an investor or not, is interested in novel approaches and drugs that are going to come along for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, MS. I mean, these are major things. We're not talking about a small incremental change in how toenail fungus is dealt with, for example. I mean, what's the opportunity to actually go from where you are now to have products like this in the market? I mean, there are a lot of people that have tried different approaches, things that seem promising. I mean, how do you get from here to there? I'll put that to both of you.
Well, I think we probably do it the same way. We have finished 2 phase 2 studies, one in Alzheimer's, one in Parkinson's. In both cases, we have really excellent data. We show improvement in cognition by 2 tests, and we show improvement in movement by 2 different tests. So the fact that we have that in both diseases by 2 totally different tests makes me feel very, very comfortable that the stuff works. And that means that right now we have petitioned the FDA for a Parkinson's meeting to move into phase 3. We are getting ready, we haven't done it yet, to petition the FDA for a meeting for a phase 3 in Alzheimer's disease. Once the FDA approves that, then we go ahead and do phase 3s. I mean, it's kind of simple. You need the money, you need the people, you need the expertise, but the pathway per se is not difficult if you have a drug that works or that you believe it works.
Now, is that the case, Bob, before I let you answer? So I know on cognition, you mentioned 2 different tests, but I understand sometimes cognition can be hard to measure. We have tests now that could measure well enough cognition to determine across patients what's actually working or not.
Well, Dave, if your drug doesn't work, you're going to blame the test. Our drug works in the very old-fashioned, most established test that has been around for 25 years. So I'm not going to blame a test that works, right? I would blame it if it didn't work.
That's a reasonable answer. Bob, what do you say?
That's a great response. Nobody can argue with that. So, drug development in neuroscience is challenging, okay, in general. And in fact, there's a reason why Pfizer doesn't have a neuroscience drug development division anymore. And AstraZeneca dumped theirs, and then they bought, that company from Boston. So there's a reason why Big Pharma is out of drug development in neuroscience. It's difficult. And the reason it's difficult is because, number one, the endpoints are squishy. They're all based on rating scales. You don't have death as an endpoint the way you do in oncology in general, although ALS is a bit different. And the other problem is that placebo works. So placebo is effective in almost every neurodegenerative disease you want to talk about. it makes drug development difficult. So basically, drug development takes, number one, a drug that works, as Maria so eloquently said. Number two, it takes time. And number three, it takes money. And so you have to have all three of those things in order to really move forward. So here we are, Clene are quite encouraged. We already have phase 2 data in ALS, which shows really remarkable clinical benefits. And we also have we have target engagement data both in Parkinson's disease and patients with MS. It shows that C9orf72 does indeed do what we say it does in terms of increasing brain energetics, both energy production and utilization, importantly, in the brains of patients with MS and Parkinson's disease. So again, we're very encouraged as well. We're going to move forward with a phase 2 study in Parkinson's disease soon, and we'll also be studying progressive MS at some point in the future.
There have been a lot of things that have happened with drug trials. Some are a little further along, some at the same phase where both of your companies are during the past 2 years. Are there things that you're doing differently as a result of the pandemic? Anything that is either harder or, in fact, easier about doing trials, given where we stand today in start of 2022, as opposed to, let's say, early 2020?
Oh, well, so I'll say this. MS drug development essentially has stopped because of the pandemic. So MS patients are generally immunomodulated or immunocompromised from their disease-modifying therapy. And so they are not going to go into clinics and be assessed. So unless you have a remote, a study that uses remote assessments that can be done, in the patient's home, and that's difficult for the endpoint that we typically use in MS, something called the modified multiple sclerosis functional composite. So that consists of 4 subtests, all of which are generally done in the clinic. So MS drug development has been very difficult in the pandemic. In fact, for a while, we were the only company doing drug development in MS in the United States. And we're looking at the futility essentially of the study that we're doing right now. So we're looking into that. ALS has not been impacted. So we are part of the Healy ALS platform trial. That trial enrolled early. Our small ALS study in Australia enrolled early. So it has not been impacted because, of course, ALS patients are on a very limited lifespan. And ALS, as people say, time for ALS patients is very different than time for normal people. So that has not been impacted. I can't speak for Alzheimer's disease.
Well, this is really interesting because I talk about 2 phase 2 studies. We really had a third one ongoing that we started earlier, but it was the first one that we started a few years ago is academic, whereas the one that we did in the last 1.5 years was really was run by us and paid by us. And it was very interesting to see the differences. In all cases, we took spinal fluid. And the reason is in phase 3, I wouldn't do that, but in phase 2, we wanted to see how the biomarker all reacted. So we took spinal fluid, and obviously you cannot take spinal fluid at home. You can't send an anesthesiologist and a neurosurgeon back to somebody's home. So in the beginning, we were really impacted. And it turns out that the academic groups, because they are in big teaching hospitals, they totally stopped. They had viruses, they had people, they had the important stuff, not our study. So that study really almost stopped for 2 years. Whereas our study, we pivoted. We said, well, the big centers don't want us because they're too busy with COVID, but the smaller clinical trial centers, they learn very fast that if they don't have patients, they don't make money. And so they were not treating COVID. So they became very efficient. We had COVID tested drivers. Everybody was COVID tested all the time. We had no COVID infections. And we really helped people. We helped them from home to the site and back. And that worked beautifully for Parkinson's patients because they're usually a little younger and they're usually male. Alzheimer's patients are usually a little older and they're usually females. That was a little harder. But we got the study done, and now the other study that slowly came back on, not all the sites are back on, but some are back on, it's going to hobble around. For phase 3, we do not see any such problem because we don't take spinal fluid, and a nurse can go to somebody's home and take blood, and we only take it every 6 months. So it's not that we are sitting on these people. And all they have to do is take a pill a day. So we feel that our phase 3 is going to be a lot easier, pandemic or no pandemic.
Maria, when you get through the phase 3 and think about FDA evaluation of a drug for Alzheimer's, it's obviously been high profile approval on the Alzheimer's front that probably cost what would have been the next FDA commissioner her job. So it certainly had an impact, and certainly among patients who are waiting for the drug as well. What do you take away from the recent approval and what it means for other late phase Alzheimer's drugs, including your own?
Well, first, I want to say the ones that mostly profit from it, it's going to be Lilly and Roche and Eisai. They're going to come out with their A-beta, say our amyloid went down. We don't have efficacy, but who cares? Our amyloid went down, and it probably maybe will get approved. Okay, I'm not 100% sure. I can't talk for the new commissioner.
Yeah.
I think for companies like Clene and us, since we do not want to change how we measure cognition, we just want to measure cognition, plus they have some biomarkers, we have some biomarkers as exploratory or secondary endpoints. I think we shouldn't have any problem as long as the drug works. I mean, the way we want to look at whether our drug works is way more stringent than what pharma does. To explain it and give you an example, the aducanumab or Aduhelm drug from Biogen improves cognition 22% above placebo. That means that people get 78% worse.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we are being very conservative because I don't want to jinx the study. So we are asking for 50% better than placebo. That's 50% worse. But in our phase 2, patients get better.
Great. Okay. Well, I hope the same or better in phase 3. Time will tell. Bob, on the ALS side, and I think about, you mentioned, of course, the ALS, the time for ALS patients is different than others. You can't wait out a 2 or 3 year pandemic, right? Once you had ALS, that's a significant portion of your life expectancy. How has
that is your life expectancy, essentially.
Yeah. How has the pandemic shaped kind of patient advocacy in ALS? And are there things that other diseases can learn from the kind of the ALS advocacy community?
I don't think the pandemic has really shaped ALS advocacy that much, frankly. I think the Aduhelm approval did affect the ALS community because I'm not a disinterested party, so please take these comments with that understanding. But this is a tragedy, right?
Yeah.
FDA approved a drug based on a biomarker that has never been shown to have any relationship to clinical effect ever. When I was at Roche, we had a drug called gantenerumab, and we did PET studies. We did 10 PET studies. We looked for any evidence of amyloid beta lowering based on PET to clinical effect. We couldn't see anything. So you're right. I mean, Maria's exactly right. Roche is going to come out and say, we actually, gantenerumab lowers amyloid beta better than aducanumab does. We have better PET data than they do. So they're going to apply for, accelerated approval. Why wouldn't they? I mean, it's tragedy, frankly. And, if Medicare approves this drug, the country as a whole is going to be paying for this because you're talking about billions of dollars that are going to be wasted on drugs that hurt people. So the problem with these monoclonal antibodies to amyloid beta is not just in the brain, it's in the blood vessels. And there is no such thing as an immunodirected therapy to amyloid beta that doesn't cause microhemorrhage or encephalopathy. So you're taking people that are elderly, that have dementia, and you're just going to give them microhemorrhage. It's really a tragedy. So again, I'm not a disinterested person, but those are my thoughts. As a neurologist, those are my thoughts. But as far as ALS goes, until we find a biomarker that FDA says, is predictive of disease progression, whether or not it is or not is a whole separate question. But if FDA believes it, then you could actually get accelerated approval based on a biomarker. But until that occurs in ALS, that's not going to happen.
So the JPM Healthcare Conference is coming up. JP Morgan itself has been a leader in terms of having people come back to the office, and I think they were pressing hard to have the meeting be in person, but then that quickly fell apart. So I want to ask, what are you hoping to achieve at JP Morgan, and how will having a virtual version of it affect those plans?
Well, actually, I wasn't expecting too much because we're kind of in between things. I was updating people. I was going to see people like you that supposedly does go independent of everything being canceled.
Yeah.
People I haven't seen in a long time. Basically, I was going to update people. I wasn't expecting any money. I wasn't expecting any corporate collaboration. We are between things. We need the FDA approval to go into phase 3. in Alzheimer's and in Parkinson's. We have enough money to do two studies, not four, one in Alzheimer's, one in Parkinson's. Once we have some data there, we're going to raise money to do the other two. And then we're going to start looking for partners.
Got it. How about for you, Bob?
No, we're in essentially the same position. We have phase 2 data in ALS, and we're going to have an end of phase 2 meeting with FDA in the spring of 2022. We'll discuss, we're already in essentially a registrational study with the Healy ALS platform trial. It's fully enrolled. So we'll have data, we'll have registration enabling data by summertime next year. So we're in this weird position of being in phase 2 and phase 3 at the same time. Neither study actually really paid for, so that was nice. That's an unusual situation, but we are going to have an end of phase 2 meeting with FDA to discuss the Healy endpoints and discuss what, how those data might support either accelerated or full approval. And then as far as the other diseases that we're going into, we haven't even done phase 2. Well, we're in phase 2 in MS, but that's stopped essentially.
Right.
Because we can't enroll patients. And then phase 2 in Parkinson's disease hasn't started yet. And we're also going to do a phase 2 in progressive MS eventually. So those are in the future. Clene is not really looking for partners, frankly. We're already on the market in NASDAQ, and our plan is to essentially be an independent company moving forward. Now, that being said, that takes money, and your stock price, matters a lot. And biotech's been hammered this year, so that's a challenge. But we're fully expecting that we will be able to be, essentially a standalone company.
Great. Well, I'm glad we were at least able to do this roundtable on CNS drug development. I have learned a lot and am energized by the programs that you are both doing. So I want to say thank you very much, Maria Mashikini, CEO and founder of Annovis, and Bob Glantzman, Chief Medical Officer at Clene. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Nice meeting you, Maria.
You've been listening to the HealthBiz podcast with me, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare business and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.